I got a wildfire alert on my cell phone. My son started the car and left me behind. Hours later, I discovered that the most devastating fire didn't come from the sky, but from the heart of the one I loved most. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Helen Grace Miller. I'm 67 years old, and I live in the Oak Ridge community, on the edge of the Angeles National Forest. That Saturday afternoon, the air smelled of drought and distant smoke. The thermometer read 100 degrees, and from my small window, I could see the sky stained a dirty orange that reminded me of the hazy, smoggy sunsets of my youth. I was wearing my floral print cotton robe, the one I inherited from my mother, with small patches on the elbows that I had sewn myself with navy blue thread. My worn-out slippers made that familiar sound against my heels as I moved around my little back room, that 10 by 12-foot space my son Ryan and his wife Jessica had built behind the main house, so I could have my privacy. The phone vibrated with the urgency that only emergency alerts have. The screen lit up with red letters. Immediate evacuation. Wildfire in the Oak Ridge area. High risk. My heart took off like a shot. I ran towards the main house, my joints protesting with every step across the cracked concrete patio where stubborn weeds grew between the fissures. The air had become thick, hard to breathe. From the back door, I could see Ryan, my 42-year-old son, loading suitcases into the white Toyota Corolla he'd bought with the money from selling my gold earrings. His wife, Jessica, was putting my 2 grandchildren, Sean and Lily, into the back seat with quick, nervous movements. Their faces were tense, but not from fear of the fire, but from the hurry to leave without me. "Ryan, honey, wait for me," I shouted, holding up my phone. "The alert came through. We have to evacuate now." He looked up at me, not with concern, not with the filial love a mother expects to see in moments of crisis. He looked at me with that mix of annoyance and coldness I had learned to recognize over the last 5 years, ever since Jessica had become the voice whispering in his ear every night. "Mom, don't get in the way. There isn't room for everyone in the car," he said, slamming the trunk shut with a thud that echoed like a door slammed on my soul. "What do you mean there's no room? I'm your mother. I'm these children's grandmother." My voice was trembling, but not from fear of the fire, but from something much worse, the premonition of a betrayal. Jessica rolled down the passenger side window. Her ash-blonde hair was perfectly styled, as if she'd had time to fix it while packing to flee. She gave me that fake smile she had perfected over 8 years of marriage to my son. "Helen, don't be so dramatic. You've lived your life. Now let us live ours in peace." And then Ryan, my boy whom I had held in my arms when he had nightmares, whom I had fed with macaroni and cheese when we had nothing more, whom I had hugged against my chest when his father left us, looked me in the eyes and spoke the words that would break me forever. "She's right, Mom. There's no room for you here anymore." The engine roared. The tires screeched on the hot asphalt. A cloud of dust and exhaust rose as the Corolla disappeared down the street, taking with it not only my family, but also the pieces of my heart that still believed in unconditional love. I stood there in the middle of the patio, with the smoke from the fire drawing closer and the echo of those words ringing in my ears. "There's no room for you here anymore." The air burned, but not as much as the wound that had opened in my chest. Sean, my 8-year-old grandson, had pressed his little face against the rear window of the car. I managed to see his tears before they turned the corner. He knew that what was happening was wrong. An 8-year-old boy had more heart than his 42-year-old father. The silence left after their departure was deafening. All I could hear was the distant crackling of the fire and the frantic beating of my broken heart. I sat on the concrete step that separated my little room from the main house, the house I had paid for with my life savings from working as a seamstress at the fabric shop downtown. My hands trembled as I searched my contacts for someone, anyone, who could help me. Marie, my 70-year-old neighbor, didn't answer. Mrs. Gable from the corner store didn't either. Everyone had evacuated. Everyone had someone who cared about them. Everyone but me. The smoke thickened and the sky darkened with a speed that reminded me of those torrential rainstorms of my childhood in my small hometown. But this time, it wasn't water falling from the sky, but ashes that settled on my shoulders like gray tears. It was in that moment, sitting on my step, breathing in smoke and abandonment, that something inside me began to change. It wasn't just the fire that was going to burn me. It was the humiliation. It was the rage. It was the awakening of a woman who had given so much that she had forgotten to save anything for herself. The fire truck sirens began to wail in the distance, but I already knew that the real fire I needed to extinguish wasn't in the mountains. It was in my own house, in my own family, in my own heart that had been too generous with those who didn't deserve it. As the ashes fell on my shoulders like tears from the sky, my mind began to unravel the tangle of sacrifices I had woven for decades. This wasn't the first time Ryan had left me behind. It was just the most obvious, the cruelest, the one that finally opened my eyes. When had it all started? Perhaps when Jessica came into our lives 8 years ago, with her calculating smile and her poisoned words. Or maybe it had started much earlier, when I got used to being the one who gave without receiving, the one who forgave without being valued. Ryan was just 23 when he brought Jessica to our small 2-bedroom house for the first time. She came from a well-off family in Pasadena, with her always perfect nails and her way of pronouncing words as if each syllable were a small jewel she didn't want to waste. From the first day, she sized me up, evaluating every corner of our modest life. "Mrs. Miller," she would say with that smile that never reached her eyes. "What a cozy home." Cozy was her elegant word for small, for poor, for insufficient for the plans she was already making for my son. The first few months were a silent war. Jessica would come over on Sundays and notice every detail she considered inadequate. The curtains I had sewn myself, the furniture I'd bought secondhand at the flea market, the chipped dinnerware that had belonged to my mother. She never said it directly, but her comments were little daggers wrapped in gift paper. "Oh, Ryan, when we have our own house, we can have everything new, right?" she'd say, stroking his arm while looking at me out of the corner of her eye. "A modern kitchen, matching furniture, a yard where the kids can play without worrying about..." Without worrying about what? Poverty? Humility? A grandmother who loved them more than her own life? Back then, I was working 12 hours a day on my sewing machine, doing alterations and embroidery for the ladies downtown. My fingers would bleed some nights from so much needlework, but every dollar I earned, I saved in a Folgers coffee can I hid behind the small cross on my wall. It was for Ryan's wedding, so he could start his marriage with dignity. When they finally asked me for money for the party, I emptied the can without hesitation. $14,000 that represented 2 years of work, of skipping meals, of walking instead of taking the bus to save the fare. I gave it to them with a smile, because that's what mothers do. They sacrifice to see their children happy. The wedding was in a hall I could never have afforded for myself. Jessica wore a dress that cost more than my income for 6 months. I wore the same navy blue dress I had bought for my mother's funeral, ironed and starched until it looked presentable among so much luxury. During the reception, Jessica introduced me to her family as Helen, Ryan's mom. Not even Mrs. Miller, just Helen. As if my age and my sacrifice didn't even deserve the basic respect of a title. Her mother, a woman thin as a rail with a snooty nose, shook my hand for a second and then looked for the nearest hand sanitizer dispenser. "It's so good the young people are going to have their own space," she told me with a smile that was pure venom. "It's important for couples to have privacy, don't you think?" I didn't understand the message until Ryan came home 3 days after their honeymoon in Hawaii. He was carrying a folder full of papers and an uncomfortable expression I didn't like at all. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, sitting at the kitchen table where he had eaten breakfast for 23 years. "Jessica and I have been thinking, this house is too small for when we have kids. And you, well, you deserve your privacy too. My privacy. As if I had ever in my life asked to be alone." The plan was simple and brutal. They would build a new house on the same lot, and I would stay in my space at the back. They would put up the money for the construction, but I would have to sign some papers to facilitate the legal process. "They're just formalities, Mom, so the bank will give us the loan," I signed without reading. I signed because I trusted. I signed because a mother doesn't doubt her son. I signed my own sentence. The construction took 8 months. 8 months during which I lived amidst the dust and noise of the workers, watching my little home become an annex, the service quarters of the main house that rose like a palace of drywall and cement, where my little garden of cilantro and mint had once been. When they finished, my private space was a 10 by 12-foot room with its own bathroom and a small kitchenette. The walls were so thin I could hear every conversation, every argument, every time Jessica complained about the clingy mother-in-law who doesn't understand boundaries. At first, I tried to stay close. I cooked for them, cleaned their house when Jessica went out with her friends, and took care of Sean and Lily when they were born. I became the free babysitter, the invisible maid, the grandmother of convenience who appeared when they needed her and disappeared when my presence bothered them. "Don't give your opinion on how we raise the children," Jessica would tell me whenever I tried to correct Sean for being disrespectful to his mother. "Don't confuse the kids with your old-fashioned ideas," she'd scold when I taught them the prayers my mother had taught me. Ryan kept quiet. He always kept quiet. My son, the one who had cried in my arms when his father left us, the one who had promised he would never leave me alone, had become a stranger who avoided my gaze when his wife humiliated me. The years passed, and I became smaller, not physically, although my shoulders stooped from carrying so much emotional weight. I shrank in importance, in voice, in presence. I became the ghost of my own house, the shadow that whispered, "Good morning," and received grunts in response. Jessica had a special way of making me feel unnecessary. When I offered to cook, she had already ordered takeout. When I wanted to play with the children, she had already planned other activities. When I tried to join family conversations, she would change the subject or simply get up and go to another room. "It's not that we don't love you, Helen," she'd say with that fake smile. "It's just that you're getting older, and you need to rest. We can handle everything." Rest from what? From loving? From being useful? From being a present grandmother to my grandchildren? The last straw had been last month during Lily's birthday. I had hand-embroidered a little pink dress with yellow flowers, working on it for 3 weeks, every stitch made with love and hope. When I gave it to her, Lily was thrilled and ran to hug me. "It's beautiful, Grandma. Can I put it on now?" Jessica intercepted the hug like a goalie blocking a shot. "Sweetheart, let's save it for another occasion. Today you're wearing the dress we bought specially for your party." The embroidered dress ended up at the back of the closet, and my granddaughter ended up wearing a dress from Nordstrom that cost 10 times what I make in a month. That night, sitting in my little room, I realized I had spent 8 years begging for scraps of affection in my own home. 8 years of being tolerated instead of loved. 8 years of being the second-class grandmother who only mattered when they needed a free babysitter. And now, with the smoke from the fire filling my lungs and the sirens sounding ever closer, I asked myself for the first time in decades, when had my own happiness stopped mattering? The sirens were getting closer, but I remained motionless on my step, reliving every little cruelty I had normalized over all these years. Because it hadn't just been the big slights, like the rejected dress or the silenced opinions. It had been thousands of tiny cuts, microscopic but constant, like drops of water carving stone. The forgotten birthdays, for example. My birthday this year had fallen on a Tuesday. I woke up hoping, like a foolish child, that someone would remember that Helen Grace Miller was turning 67. I made extra coffee, just in case Ryan wanted to have breakfast with me like when he was a boy. I set the table for 2, with the porcelain cups I had inherited from my grandmother, the ones I only brought out for special occasions. At 8 in the morning, I heard their voices in the main kitchen. Jessica was yelling because she couldn't find Sean's shoes. Ryan responded with that tired voice he had adopted in recent years, as if life were a burden too heavy for his shoulders. "Sean, hurry up, or we'll be late for school." I waited. Maybe they would remember after breakfast, when the morning rush calmed down. I sat at my little table, watching the coffee grow cold as the sounds from the main house gradually faded. The car started. They left. At 11 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. It was the mailman with a package for Jessica. I took the opportunity to ask him the date, pretending to be absent-minded. March 18th, ma'am. Everything okay? Yes, yes. Just checking. March 18th. My birthday. I went back to my room and sat on the bed. The porcelain cups remained on the table until 6 in the evening, when I finally washed them and put them away. No one asked why I had set 2 places. No one noticed the wildflowers I had picked from the vacant lot on the corner to make myself a small bouquet. No one remembered that I, too, had been born, that I, too, deserved to be celebrated. Worse still were the times I got sick. Last year, during the rainy season, I caught a flu that left me in bed for a week. A high fever, body aches, a cough that tore at my chest as if I had nails in my lungs. I knocked on the wall separating my room from the main house, hoping someone would come to ask how I was feeling. On the first day, Jessica poked her head in the door. "Are you sick? Let's hope it's nothing contagious. The kids can't get sick now that school is starting." She didn't ask if I needed medicine. She didn't offer to make me tea. She didn't even stay for 5 minutes to see how serious it was. She was only worried that her family wouldn't catch whatever I had. Ryan was worse. When he finally came to see me on the 3rd day, it was because Jessica sent him to check if I was still alive or if she could clean the house yet. "Are you feeling better, Mom? Jessica needs you to watch the kids tomorrow. She has an appointment at the salon." I got up on the 4th day, dizzy and weak, because in that house I had no right to be sick. The children needed someone to look after them while their parents lived their lives without interruption. I dragged myself to the main kitchen and made quesadillas for breakfast, still feverish, because that was my function. To exist, to serve. But the most painful microaggressions were the ones that happened in front of other people, like the day Jessica's sister came to visit from Dallas. Brenda was an elegant woman, dressed in the kind of clothes that scream, "I have money," from a distance. She arrived in a new car, with leather suitcases and a condescending smile she had perfected over years of feeling superior. I had cleaned the entire house that morning, placed fresh flowers in every corner, and prepared a slow-cooked beef brisket, Ryan's favorite dish since he was a boy. It took me 3 hours to prepare, using my grandmother's old recipe, the same one my mother had used to teach me the secrets of traditional cooking. When Brenda arrived, Jessica welcomed her in the living room as if she were a queen visiting her subjects. "Sis, so good to have you here. Come, I'll show you the whole house. Look how beautifully it turned out." I came out of the kitchen, wiping my hands on my apron, expecting to be introduced. After all, I was the mother-in-law, the children's grandmother, the original owner of the land where that house was built. "Oh," Jessica said when she saw me. "That's Helen. She lives in the room out back." That's Helen, not my mother-in-law, not Ryan's mom, not the kid's grandma. Just Helen who lives in the room out back, as if I were the housekeeper or a second-class tenant. Brenda greeted me with the tips of her fingers, as if my presence were an annoying thing to be tolerated out of politeness. "Nice to meet you," she murmured, and immediately turned back to Jessica. "And where's my brother-in-law? I want to meet this man who conquered my sister's heart." For the entire visit, which lasted 5 days, I was invisible. I cooked, I cleaned, I looked after the children while the sisters went shopping and to spas. When I served the food, Brenda praised the cooking as if Jessica had prepared everything. "Sis, you cook deliciously. Where did you learn to make such a tasty brisket?" Jessica smiled and accepted the compliments without correcting her sister, without mentioning that the one who had spent hours in the kitchen was me. Ryan didn't say anything either. My own son watched as I was erased from the family equation and remained silent, as if acknowledging me would be a betrayal of his marriage. The night before Brenda left, I heard them talking in the living room. I was in my room, but the walls were so thin that every word reached my ears like daggers. "Jessica, you have to do something about your mother-in-law," Brenda said in that voice she used when she thought no one else could hear. "She's so nosy. She gets into everything, has an opinion on everything. And the kids are too attached to her. That's not healthy." "I know," Jessica sighed. "But Ryan is so sentimental about his mom. He says we can't kick her out because she has nowhere else to go." "Well, find a nursing home, or have her go live with some other relative. But you can't live like this. A house needs only one lady, and that has to be you." "You're right. I'm going to talk to Ryan. It's time he set some boundaries. The boundaries arrived the following week. Ryan knocked on my door after dinner, with that uncomfortable expression he wore when Jessica sent him to tell me something unpleasant. "Mom, we need to establish some rules so we can all live in harmony." The rules were simple and devastating. I couldn't enter the main house without permission. I couldn't have an opinion on the children's upbringing. I couldn't cook for the family unless they specifically asked me to. I couldn't invite anyone to my room without consulting them first. I couldn't use the washing machine after 6 p.m. because the noise was bothersome. They're just to avoid misunderstandings, Mom. Jessica needs her space to be the lady of the house. I accepted the rules because I didn't know I had another option. I became a tenant on my own property, a stranger in the home I had built with the sweat of my brow and the love of my heart. But the worst part wasn't the rules. The worst part was the way Ryan had started to look at me, as if I were a burden, an obstacle to his marital happiness. My boy, the one who had cried when he got hurt and ran into my arms, now avoided being alone with me. When I spoke, he looked at his phone. When I asked about his work, he answered in monosyllables. When I tried to hug him, he would stiffen and find an excuse to pull away. I had become the ghost of my own family. I existed but didn't matter. I was present but invisible. I breathed the same air as them but lived in a different world, one where love had cooled into tolerance, and tolerance had turned into silent contempt. Now, sitting on my step as the ashes of the fire fell on my shoulders, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. My son had abandoned me long before he started that car and left me alone with the approaching fire. He had abandoned me slowly, systematically, for years, until leaving me behind in an emergency felt like the most natural thing in the world. The question that tormented me as I watched the sky darken wasn't why he had left me that day. It was why I had let it get to this point. At 6 p.m, when the sky began to clear and the sirens moved away to other sectors, I heard the familiar sound of the Corolla's engine returning down the street. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand and stood up from the step, my legs numb from staying still for so long. Ryan got out of the car with the carefree calm of someone returning from a Sunday drive. Jessica emerged from the passenger side, adjusting her sunglasses as if the last rays of light bothered her. The kids ran towards the house, Sean shouting something about the ice cream they had bought on the way. "See, Mom?" Ryan said, closing the car door with a casual thud. Nothing happened. The fire didn't even get close to here. You always overreact to these things. We did you a favor by not taking you. We saved you the stress of the traffic and all that craziness. I just stared at him, trying to process those words. A favor? Abandoning me in the middle of an emergency had been a favor. Besides, Jessica added, pulling shopping bags from the back seat, we took the opportunity to go to Nordstrom. They had some incredible sales. Look at this beautiful blouse I bought. They had gone shopping. While I was left alone, breathing smoke and wondering if I would ever see them alive again, they had gone to the mall to take advantage of the sales. The emergency that had served as their excuse to abandon me had turned into a family outing. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Ryan asked, frowning at my silence. "Aren't you going to thank us for being concerned about your health by sparing you all that commotion?" Thank him. He wanted me to thank him for leaving me behind. That night, when the main house fell into the silence of its nightly routine, I sat on my bed, and something inside me broke. It wasn't a dramatic break, like a plate shattering on the floor. It was more like an old fabric finally giving way after years of use. A silent but definitive tear. I got up and walked to the small closet where I kept my few belongings. In the back, behind the blankets I rarely used, was the shoebox where I kept my important documents. I took it out with trembling hands and sat on the cold linoleum floor. Inside were the papers I had signed years ago when Ryan convinced me it was just a formality for the bank. I had never looked at them again. I had always trusted that my son would do the right thing, that the papers would say what he had explained to me. In the light of the table lamp, I began to read. The words were blurry at first. My eyes weren't what they used to be, but gradually, the letters took shape, and the meaning became crystal clear. The house was in my name. The entire property, the whole lot, was still legally mine. Ryan and Jessica had built their new house on my land, with my permission, but the deed had never been transferred. They were living on my property as, what? Tenants? Squatters? I checked every document twice, then a third time. The will I had made when Ryan got married, leaving him everything, was still in a sealed envelope. I had never updated or registered it. Technically, legally, unquestionably, I was still the owner of everything. How was it possible that I had forgotten? How had I allowed them to treat me like an intruder in my own home? The answer came with the bitterness of truth, because I had wanted to believe that family love was stronger than any legal paper. Because I had thought that blood and affection were enough to protect me. Because I had been a sentimental fool who confused generosity with stupidity. The next day, while Jessica took the children to school and Ryan left for his job at the hardware store, I made a decision I hadn't made in decades: to leave the house without asking permission, without giving notice, without offering an explanation. I walked the 6 blocks to the bus stop with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The morning sun warmed my face, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. People at the bus stop greeted me with small smiles, as if they could perceive something different in my posture, in the way I held my head high. At the county recorder's office, a young employee with pink-framed glasses helped me review all the information for my property. She confirmed what the document said. Helen Grace Miller was the sole legal owner of the property at 247 Oak Ridge Lane. "Do you need any special services today, ma'am?" the young woman asked with genuine kindness, the first I had received from a stranger in months. "Not yet," I replied, putting the certified papers in my purse. But soon, on my way back, I stopped at the small law office that Mr. Davis had opened on the corner of my street. He was an older man, perhaps my age, with respectable gray hair and a way of speaking that inspired confidence. He handled simple cases: divorces, wills, property disputes. "Mrs. Miller," he said after reviewing my documents, "you have all the legal rights to this property. If the people living there do not have a registered lease agreement, they are technically occupying it without legal authorization. What does that mean? It means you can ask them to leave whenever you wish. It's your house, her house." Those words resonated in my chest like bells of freedom. I walked back slowly, savoring each step on the cracked pavement of my neighborhood. I looked at my house with new eyes: the walls I had paid for, the roof I had financed, the yard where I had planted the first orange tree that now shaded the entire entrance. It was mine. It was all mine. That afternoon, as I prepared my solitary dinner in my small kitchenette, I heard them arguing in the main house. Their voices carried clearly through the thin walls, but this time I didn't shrink in pain at their cruel words. This time I listened with the coldness of someone gathering strategic information. "Your mom is acting very strange," Jessica said in that high-pitched voice she used when she was annoyed. "She was gone all morning without saying a word. Where could she have gone?" "I don't know, and honestly I don't care," Ryan answered with a tone of annoyance that cut me like a knife. "As long as she's not bothering us, she can do whatever she wants." "Ryan, I'm serious. Your mother is making me nervous. Yesterday she gave me a really strange look when we got back from the mall. As if, I don't know, as if she were angry or something." "Jessica, you have an overactive imagination. My mom is harmless. What could she possibly do? She's an old woman in her 60s with no education and no money. She's completely dependent on us. A harmless old woman, uneducated, penniless, dependent." Each word was a slap, but this time they didn't hurt. This time they filled me with a cold, calculated determination I didn't know I possessed. "Besides," Ryan continued, "when she passes away, this whole property will be ours. It's in her will. We just have to wait. What if she lives for many more years?" "Jessica, please. She's already 67 and not in the best of health. How much longer can she last? How much longer can she last?" They spoke of my death as if they were discussing the weather. "Sometimes I think it would be easier if she got sick enough to be put in a home," Jessica murmured in the voice she used when she thought her darkest thoughts were secret. "Then we could sell this property and buy something better in Pasadena, near my parents." "Don't say things like that," Ryan replied, but his tone wasn't one of moral reprimand. It sounded like practical caution. "If someone heard you, Who's going to hear us? Your mom's in her room and the kids are asleep. Aye, but I heard them. Every word was seared into my memory like a branding iron. My own family, planning to get rid of me as if I were an old piece of furniture that no longer matched the decor. I sat on my bed, the property documents spread out on the quilt, and for the first time in 8 years, I smiled with genuine satisfaction. They thought I was a harmless old woman with no money and no options. They were in for the surprise of their lives. That night, while they slept in their house built on my land, I began to plan my resurrection. The next few days were the strangest of my life. I walked around the property with a secret that made me feel like I was carrying diamonds hidden in my apron. Every time Jessica spoke to me with contempt or Ryan ignored me, I smiled inwardly, knowing something they didn't, that I had the power to change everything at any moment. On Monday morning, while Jessica was yelling because she couldn't find the kids' clean uniforms, I was in my room meticulously organizing all my documents, not just the property papers, but also my IDs, my proof of income from my sewing work, the few photographs I had managed to keep from better times. "Helen!" Jessica shouted from the main kitchen. "Where did you put Sean's shirt? You were supposed to wash it yesterday." I didn't answer immediately. For the first time in years, I took my time finishing what I was doing before responding to her summons. When I finally came out of my room, Jessica was standing in the doorway with her hands on her hips, and that expression of contained fury she had perfected over 8 years of treating me like her personal maid. "Are you deaf? I'm talking to you." "The shirt is on the clothesline," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "If you need it urgently, you can go get it yourself." Jessica blinked several times, as if she hadn't understood my words correctly. "Excuse me? Are you telling me to go get the clothes myself?" "I'm telling you I'm no longer your free servant." The words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them, but instead of scaring me, they filled me with a deep, warm satisfaction. Jessica's jaw dropped, literally, as if she had just seen a ghost speak. "What's wrong with you? Are you sick?" "I'm perfectly fine. Better than ever, I'd say." That same day, when Ryan got home from work, Jessica was waiting for him at the door like a soldier reporting an emergency. "Your mom is acting really weird," she told him in a low voice, but not low enough for me not to hear from my room. "This morning she talked back to me, as if she were my equal or something." "What did you say to her?" "Nothing special. I just asked her to find Sean's shirt, and she got all high and mighty. I think she's going senile." Senile. The word bounced off the walls of my room like a rubber ball. Ryan didn't come to talk to me that night. I assumed Jessica had convinced him that my rebellion was a symptom of mental decline that was best ignored. On Tuesday, I decided to take the next step. When Jessica went out shopping, taking Lily with her, I went into the main kitchen and prepared the most elaborate breakfast I had made in months. Biscuits and sausage gravy, coffee brewed with cinnamon, and sweet rolls I had bought from the corner bakery. When Sean came down for breakfast before school, he stopped at the kitchen door with wide eyes. "Grandma, it smells delicious. Is this for us?" "Of course, my beautiful grandson. Come, sit down." Sean came over with a smile that reminded me so much of Ryan when he was little. For 8 years, he had eaten cold cereal or toast for breakfast because Jessica considered cooking in the morning to be too much work for the little time we have. "Grandma," he said as he ate with the enthusiasm of a child who hadn't had a home-cooked meal in a long time, "why don't you cook like this anymore?" The question pierced my heart. How could I explain to an 8-year-old boy that his mother had forbidden me from cooking for the family? How could I tell him that I had been reduced to a stranger in my own home? "Because sometimes adults make mistakes, sweetheart. But I'm going to try to cook more often. Yes, your biscuits are the best in the world." When Jessica returned and saw the dirty dishes in the sink, her face transformed into a mask of fury. "Who cooked in here?" "I did," I answered from my seat at the table, where I was still drinking my coffee with the tranquility of someone in her own home. "I told you not to use my kitchen without permission." "It's not your kitchen, Jessica. It's the kitchen of this house, and this house is mine." The words came out so naturally that for a moment even I couldn't believe I had said them. Jessica turned pale, then red, then pale again. "What did you say?" "You heard me perfectly. Helen, I think you need to see a doctor. You're behaving very strangely." The only strange thing is that it took me so long to remember who I am. That night, the argument in the main house was more intense than ever. Jessica spoke with the hysteria of someone who feels the world slipping out of their control. "Ryan, your mom is going crazy. Today she said the house was hers. Can you believe it? An old woman with nothing to her name claiming she owns our house. It must be senile dementia," Ryan replied with the expert medical voice he used when he had no idea what he was talking about. "I've heard that at that age, they start having delusions of grandeur. And what are we going to do? We can't live with a crazy woman in the backyard. What if she gets violent? Jessica, please. She's my mom, a 67-year-old lady. What can she do? I don't know, but we have to do something. Today she challenged me directly, in my own kitchen. Even in her moments of panic, Jessica still believed that everything around her belonged to her by divine right. On Wednesday, I decided to speed up the process. I left early and went to the bank where I had my savings account, the one I had kept secret all these years. It wasn't much money, but it was mine, earned dollar by dollar with my sewing and embroidery. I withdrew enough to pay for a full legal consultation with Mr. Davis. This time, it wasn't a general information visit. This time, I went with a specific plan. "Mr. Davis," I said, sitting in his small office that smelled of paper and old coffee, "I want you to prepare the necessary documents to evict the people living on my property without a legal contract." The man looked at me over his glasses, assessing whether I was serious. "Mrs. Miller, are you sure about this decision? I understand they are members of your family." "Mas, that's precisely why I need everything to be done correctly, with all the legal requirements. How much time do you want to give them to vacate?" I thought of the 8 years of humiliation, the thousands of small cruelties, the conversation where they planned to put me in a home to sell my house. 30 days. That's more time than they gave me when they abandoned me during the fire. Mr. Davis nodded and began typing on his old typewriter, the sound of the keys like war drums. When I returned home that afternoon, I found Jessica waiting for me at the entrance to my room with a smile that I didn't like at all. "Helen, Ryan and I have been talking. We think it would be a good idea for you to see a doctor. We've noticed you've been very confused lately." "I'm not confused, Jessica. For the first time in years, I see things with perfect clarity. Look, I know we're hard on you sometimes, but it's for your own good. A woman your age needs structure, needs someone to make the tough decisions for her. For my own good. The favorite phrase of every manipulator in the world. Do you know what I need, Jessica?" "What?" "I need you to come to my room tomorrow afternoon. I have something to show you." "What is it?" "It's a surprise, but I assure you it's going to change the way you see our family situation." Jessica looked at me with suspicion, but also with curiosity. She probably thought I had finally broken completely and was going to confess some embarrassing secret or beg her forgiveness for my recent behavior. "Fine," she said finally, "but I hope it's something sensible. No more of this nonsense about owning the house." I smiled with the sweetness of a grandmother about to tell a very special story. "Oh, Jessica, I assure you, what I have to show you is the most sensible thing I've done in my life." That night, I put the eviction documents in a new manila envelope. The papers crackled with the authority of the law, with the weight of long overdue justice. For the first time in 8 years, I fell asleep with a smile on my face. On Thursday afternoon, at 4 o'clock sharp, Jessica knocked on my door with that mix of impatience and condescension she had perfected over 8 years of treating me as if I were a petulant child. "Helen, can we talk about what you wanted to show me now? I have to pick up the kids at 5. I opened the door with a serenity that surprised me. I had spent the whole morning practicing this moment in front of the small mirror on my dresser, rehearsing the words that would change everything forever. "Please sit down," I said, pointing to the only chair in my room. Jessica looked around with that disdainful expression she wore every time she entered my space. Her eyes lingered on the faded walls, the single bed with its faded floral quilt, the small table where I ate my lonely dinners. "Helen, we really should think about renovating this room. It's very run down." "Sit down, Jessica." Something in my tone made her obey immediately. She perched on the edge of the chair, as if not wanting to contaminate her expensive clothes with my humble furniture. I walked to my closet and took out the manila envelope. The paper crackled between my fingers like dry leaves in autumn, a sound that was like heavenly music to my ears. For 8 years, I began, holding the envelope against my chest. I have lived like a stranger in my own home. I have accepted your humiliations, your contempt, your arbitrary rules. I have allowed you to treat me as if I were a burden, as if my existence were a favor you were doing me. Helen, don't be dramatic. You've always had a roof over your head. Food, silence. The word came out with such authority that Jessica immediately shut her mouth, her eyes widening in surprise. She had never heard me speak like that. I have lived listening to you plan how to get rid of me, how you wait for my death to take what you believe belongs to you, how you dream of putting me in a home to sell my property. Jessica turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. I raised a hand to stop her lies. The walls in this house are very thin, and you two talk very loudly when you think no one is listening. I opened the envelope with deliberately slow movements, savoring the way anxiety was reflected on Jessica's face. Her eyes followed my every gesture as if it were a matter of life and death. Do you remember when Ryan asked me to sign some papers to facilitate the legal process for the construction? Yes. They were papers from the bank. A lie. I pulled out the first document. This is a certified copy of the deed to this property. Do you know what it says? Jessica shook her head, but something in her expression told me she was beginning to suspect the truth. It says that Helen Grace Miller is the sole and legitimate owner of this land and all the structures on it. The words tasted like freedom in my mouth. Your house, Jessica, is built on my land. That can't be true. Ryan lied. Or maybe he lied to himself, but the law is very clear. I pulled out the second document. This is a legal opinion confirming that you have been living on my property without a lease agreement, without paying rent, without my formal consent. Jessica jumped to her feet so quickly the chair wobbled. This is ridiculous. We built this house. We invested our savings. On my land. Without my legal permission. Without transferring the ownership. My voice remained calm, but inside I felt a euphoria I hadn't experienced in decades. Technically, you're squatters. We're your family. Family doesn't abandon its members in emergencies. Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't conspire to get rid of the elderly like they're trash. Jessica began pacing in my small room, her heels clicking against the linoleum like desperate hammer blows. Helen, I know we've had our differences, but this is insane. Where will we live? What will happen to the children? You should have thought of that before you treated me the way you did. Please, we can fix this. We can change. I promise things will be different. Promises. How many promises had I heard over 8 years? Promises of respect that never came, of consideration that evaporated the next day, of love that only appeared when they needed something from me. It's too late for promises, Jessica. I pulled the last document from the envelope. The official paper with Mr. Davis's seal and the signature I had put on it that very morning. This is a legal eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate my property. Jessica took the paper with trembling hands. Her eyes darted from left to right, reading words she apparently couldn't fully process. 30 days, she repeated, as if the words were in a foreign language. Helen, you can't do this. We're a family. A family wouldn't have started the car and left me alone during a fire. Jessica collapsed back into the chair, the eviction notice falling to the floor like a dead leaf. What do you want from us? Money? An apology? What do we have to do to make you change your mind? For a moment, just a moment, I felt a twinge of pity for her. Jessica looked small and lost, stripped of all the arrogance that had characterized her for 8 years. But then I remembered her laugh when she talked about putting me in a home. I remembered her comments about my death as if it were an inconvenience that was taking too long. I don't want anything from you, Jessica. That is precisely the difference between us. I give love unconditionally. You only know how to take. She sat in silence for several minutes, the eviction notice at her feet like physical evidence of how the world had changed in a single afternoon. The children will miss you, she said finally, as if it were her last manipulative resort. The children are always welcome to visit me. They are not to blame for their parents' mistakes. And if Ryan talks to you, if he apologizes, Ryan had 8 years to apologize. He had thousands of opportunities to defend me from your attacks, to recognize my worth, to treat me with the respect a mother deserves. I sat on my bed, feeling for the first time in years that I was exactly where I should be. The time for easy apologies is over. Jessica picked up the paper from the floor and stood up with the movements of an old woman, as if she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. I'm going to talk to Ryan. We're going to fix this. You can try, but the legal documents have already been filed. In 30 days, if you haven't left voluntarily, the authorities will come to remove you. When Jessica left my room, I heard her footsteps running across the patio. I heard her slam the door of the main house. I heard her voice screaming Ryan's name like a fire alarm. I remained seated on my bed, in my room, in my house, feeling something I hadn't experienced in 8 years. Peace. For the first time since Ryan got married, I wasn't afraid of what would happen tomorrow. I didn't have to walk on eggshells to avoid bothering anyone. I didn't have to ask permission to exist in my own home. That night, the argument in the main house was epic. Shouting, crying, threats, pleas. Ryan came to knock on my door at 11 o'clock at night, but I had already bolted it from the inside and didn't open it. Mom, open the door. We need to talk. There's nothing left to talk about, Ryan, I answered from my bed. If you want to communicate with me, do it through Mr. Davis. His contact information is on the legal documents. Mom, please, I'm your son. My son died the day he started the car and left me alone with the fire approaching. You are a stranger who has been living in my house without permission. The silence that followed lasted for several minutes. Then I heard his footsteps walking away, defeated, towards the house he could no longer call his own. For the first time in decades, I fell asleep with a smile on my face and the absolute certainty that tomorrow would be a better day than today. The next 10 days were the most intense of my life. Jessica and Ryan went through all the stages of grief: denial, anger, negotiation, depression. I stood firm through each one, a lighthouse in the storm I had decided to create to save my own dignity. At first, they tried to ignore the legal documents, as if pretending they didn't exist would make them magically disappear. They continued their normal routine, taking the kids to school, going to work, preparing their dinners as if nothing had changed. But I had changed. On Friday morning, I left my room with a decision I had been postponing for 8 years. I walked to the main house and, without knocking, entered the kitchen where Jessica was making breakfast for the children. "Good morning," I said with a calm that surprised even me. Jessica turned around, her eyes swollen from crying, with a look of desperate hope. "Helen, are you here to tell us you've changed your mind? I'm here to let you know that the painters are coming today." "The painters?" "To paint my house. My entire house." I walked to the window and looked at the yard where I had once grown flowers before they turned it into a parking space. "I want everything to be new and clean when you leave, with no trace of the last 8 years. Jessica's face fell. In that moment, she understood that this was not an empty threat, not an old woman's tantrum that would pass in a few days. It was a decision made with the coldness of someone who has reached the limit of their endurance. "The kids will come home from school and see painters everywhere. How will they—" I explained that. "With the truth. Tell them Grandma is fixing up her house." Sean walked into the kitchen just then, in his school uniform, with that morning smile that reminded me so much of Ryan as a child. "Grandma, are you having breakfast with us?" I looked at Jessica, who shot me a pleading glance. For a moment, my heart softened. The children weren't to blame for their parents' mistakes. Just for today, my beautiful grandson. Just for today. I had breakfast with Sean and Lily in a way I hadn't in years. I told them stories about when their dad was little. I showed them how to make shapes with paper napkins. I listened to them talk about their friends at school and their favorite teachers. Jessica watched us in silence. And for the first time in 8 years, I saw something like remorse in her eyes. "Grandma," Lily asked as she finished her cereal, "why has Mommy been crying so much lately?" Jessica's eyes filled with fresh tears. She looked at me with an expression that said, "Please, don't tell them the truth. Sometimes grown-ups cry when we realize the mistakes we've made, my beautiful girl. It's normal." Sean, with the wisdom that children have for sensing what adults are trying to hide, asked me, "Did we do something wrong, Grandma?" You have never done anything wrong. You are perfect just the way you are. After breakfast, I went with Jessica to take the children to school. It was a silent drive, but not an uncomfortable one. It was the silence of two women who finally understood each other completely. "Helen," she said on the way back, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but can we still be friends? After all of this, I mean." The question surprised me. In 8 years, Jessica had never shown any interest in being my friend. I had been useful, tolerable, sometimes even convenient, but never a person whose friendship was worth cultivating. "I don't know, Jessica. Friendship requires mutual respect, and that's something you'll have to learn from scratch." "I will. I promise you. We'll see." That afternoon, the painters arrived. 3 young men who worked with the efficiency of people who know that every hour counts. They started with my room, transforming the gray walls into a soft yellow that reminded me of the sunsets in my small hometown. Watching my space change color was like watching my own life change. Each pass of the roller erased a year of humiliation. Each drop of fresh paint covered the tear stains I had shed in silence on so many lonely nights. Ryan came home from work to find the house in the midst of a transformation. The painters had spread drop cloths everywhere, and the smell of fresh paint hung in the air like the incense of renewal. "What's going on here?" he asked with that authoritative voice he used when he thought someone had done something without his permission. "I'm renovating my house," I answered from the doorway of my room, where I was supervising the painter's work. "Your house?" "My house, Ryan. The house that I paid for, that is legally mine, and where you have been living as a guest for 8 years. He looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and something that might have been respect. For the first time in a long time, he didn't avoid my gaze. "Mom, we need to talk." "No, Ryan. You need to accept reality. In 20 days, you're leaving here, and I am going to get on with my life. And what about us? What about the grandkids you love?" The question hurt, but it didn't break me. I had thought a lot about that over the last few days. The children will continue to be my grandchildren. They will come to visit me whenever they want. They will eat my pancakes on Sundays. They will learn to quilt and to make oatmeal cookies. The difference is that now they will come because they want to, not because their parents need a free babysitter. Mom, the difference, Ryan, is that now they will have a grandmother who respects herself, and that is better for them than having a grandmother who accepts being mistreated. That night, after the painters had left and my room was transformed into a space that finally felt like mine, I sat on my newly painted bed and allowed myself to cry. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of liberation, of the joy you feel when you finally get back something you thought you had lost forever, your own dignity. The next day, Saturday, I did something I hadn't done in 8 years. I went to the fabric shop downtown to buy new fabrics. Not to sew for others, but to sew for myself. I wanted new curtains for my yellow room. I wanted a cheerful tablecloth for my little table. I wanted clothes that I liked, not just clothes that were practical. At Mrs. Peterson's stall, where I had bought fabric for decades, she greeted me with a huge smile. "Helen, what a miracle to see you here. I haven't seen you in months. I'm redoing my house, my friend. I need beautiful fabrics, the kind that brighten up your life." "Oh, that's wonderful. It's about time you treated yourself a little." I spent the whole morning choosing fabrics like a teenager picking out a prom dress. Floral fabrics in pastel shades, fabrics with soft textures that made you want to touch them, fabrics that made me smile just by looking at them. When I got home, loaded with bags full of possibilities, I came across a scene I hadn't expected. Jessica was on the patio, sitting on the step where I had cried on the day of the fire, with a suitcase beside her. "Are you leaving already?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I'm going to stay with my sister in Dallas for a few days. I need to think, to process all of this." She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Genuine humility. "Helen, these past few days I've been remembering all the times I treated you badly, all the times I made you feel like you were a burden, and I'm ashamed. So ashamed. I don't know how I could have been so cruel to the woman who raised the man I love." Her words touched me, but they didn't soften me. I had heard too many empty apologies for too many years. "Shame is a good start, Jessica. But feelings don't erase actions. I know. And I also know it's probably too late to fix things between us. But I want you to know that I admire what you're doing. The woman I met 8 years ago would never have had the courage to do this. The woman you met 8 years ago was dead inside. I am the woman who was reborn from her ashes. Jessica nodded, picked up her suitcase and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned to me one last time. The kids are going to miss you terribly, and I'll miss them. But now they'll miss me for the right reasons. That night, for the first time in 8 years, I had the house completely to myself. Ryan had gone out to look for rental apartments. The kids were sleeping over at their other grandparents' house, and I was alone with my newfound freedom. I turned on my little radio, playing music by Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson that I hadn't listened to in years, because Jessica found it to be old people music. I cut fabric late into the night, sewing curtains that billowed in the night breeze like flags of victory. For the first time in decades, I felt completely alive. It's been 6 months since the day Ryan and his family left my house. 6 months since I got back not only my property, but my soul. This morning, as I water the flowers I planted where their parking space used to be, I stopped to contemplate everything that has changed. My garden is full of orange and yellow sunflowers, of red roses that perfume the air, of aromatic herbs that I use to cook just for myself. The house is painted in colors I chose: soft yellow in my room, pale pink in the kitchen, sky blue in the living room that is now all mine. I have a new routine, one dictated by no one but myself. I wake up at 7, not because someone needs me to make breakfast or watch children, but because it's the time my body naturally chose. I have my coffee at my table in the main kitchen, the table where I couldn't sit without permission before, reading the newspaper I buy every day from the corner store. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I teach a quilting class at the community center. I never thought I'd be a teacher, but it turns out I have a lot to teach. My students are women of all ages who come not just to learn how to handle needles and thread, but also to value themselves. "Mrs. Miller," they tell me, "you inspire us with your story. My story." People now talk about my story as if it were something heroic, when all I did was what I should have done years ago. Respect myself. The weekends are my favorite. Sean and Lily come to visit me on Saturday afternoons. At first, Ryan would bring them with a face like he was at a funeral, as if he were handing them over to a dangerous stranger. Now he comes with something resembling respect, although he still can't look me in the eye for very long. "Grandma," Sean asked me last Saturday while we ate the grilled cheese sandwiches we had made together, "why does Dad look sad when he leaves you here?" "Because your dad is learning something very difficult, sweetheart. He's learning that actions have consequences. Like when I don't do my homework and the teacher gives me a bad grade? Exactly like that, but with more important things." Lily, who is now 6 and more observant than any child her age should be, added, "But you don't look sad, Grandma. You look prettier. Prettier." From the mouths of children comes the purest truth, and it's true. I do look better. I've put on a little weight because I eat without guilt now. I've had my hair cut at a real salon, not in my room with dull scissors. I've bought clothes I like, not just clothes that are practical. But most of all, I walk differently. With my head held high, my shoulders straight, with the confidence of someone who knows exactly where she belongs. Jessica came back from Dallas after 2 months. They found a small apartment in a more modest neighborhood near the kids' school. She no longer has a housekeeper, she can't afford to go to the salon every week, she doesn't wear designer clothes anymore. But when she comes to drop off or pick up the children, she speaks to me with a genuine courtesy she had never shown before. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," she says now, and the Mrs. doesn't sound like mockery, but like real respect. Last week she brought me a bouquet of carnations. "It's not an apology," she clarified immediately. "I know apologies aren't enough for what I did. It's just acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that you were right." I accepted the flowers and put them in the crystal vase that had belonged to my mother, the same vase Jessica had criticized for being too old-fashioned for her modern decor. Ryan has changed too, though he's having a harder time. He still has that expression of a scolded child when he sees me. He still avoids long conversations. He still seems to be waiting for me to tell him all is forgiven and he can come home. But 3 weeks ago, he surprised me. He arrived on a Saturday afternoon, after dropping off the kids, and stood at my door without saying anything for several minutes. "Do you need something?" I asked without inviting him in. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Ask." How did you know you had to do this? How did you know it was time to stop?" The question reached my heart, not because I felt sorry for him, but because it finally seemed genuine. When I realized I would rather die in a fire than keep living the way I was. Ryan turned pale. "Mom," when I understood that my own grandchildren were going to grow up thinking it was okay to treat older people badly, because that's what they saw in their home every day. "I never wanted—" "What you wanted stopped mattering the day you decided your wife was more valuable than your mother. The day you chose the comfort of avoiding confrontation over the dignity of the one who gave you life." Ryan was quiet for a long time. Then, in a voice that seemed to come from far away, he said, "I don't know how to fix this." "It can't be fixed, Ryan. Something new can be built, but on a different foundation. And that's going to take time. A lot of time." "How much time?" "As long as it takes for you to become the man I thought you had grown up to be." Since then, our conversations are different. Not necessarily better, but more honest. Ryan no longer tries to convince me to forgive and forget. He no longer asks me to go back to being the grandmother who accepts any treatment just to be near the family. Now he asks me things like, "How would you like to handle the Christmas holidays?" Or, "What rules do you want the kids to follow when they're here?" He asks me. He doesn't tell me. It's a small but fundamental change. Yesterday, while I was sewing new curtains for the living room, someone knocked on my door. It was Mrs. Gable, the lady from the corner store, with a huge smile on her wrinkled face. "Helen, I've come to gossip," she said bluntly. "All right, tell me. Did you hear that Mrs. Johnson from the street behind us kicked her daughter-in-law out of the house?" "Really?" "Yes. She says you gave her the courage, that if Helen Miller could do it at 67, she could do it at 72. I laughed, a deep laugh that came from my stomach. "Am I famous in the neighborhood now?" "Very famous. The ladies are saying you're an inspiration, that you proved it's never too late to stand up for yourself." An inspiration. I never thought my story would be an inspiration for anyone, but now I understand that perhaps that is the most important thing I can leave in this world. The proof that it is possible to be reborn, that it is possible to find courage when you thought you had none left, that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity. Tonight, as I watch the sunset from my blooming garden, with a cup of chamomile tea I made just for myself, I think about the long road I've traveled. From that terrible afternoon of the fire, when I thought my life was over, to this moment of absolute peace in my own home, in my own life, in my own skin. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I doubted, days when I thought maybe I had been too harsh, moments when the loneliness weighed on me so much that I considered calling Ryan and telling them they could come back. But every time I had those thoughts, I remembered Jessica's words planning to put me in a home. I remembered the look of contempt on Ryan's face when he started the car. I remembered all the forgotten birthdays, all the times I was treated as if I were invisible. And then I would take a deep breath, look at myself in the mirror, and see a woman who had regained her strength, her dignity, her right to be loved correctly or not at all. Sometimes I wonder, have you been in a similar situation? Have you allowed the people you love most to treat you as if you were less important than any stranger on the street? If so, leave me a comment telling me your story. Because sometimes, knowing we are not alone in our pain is the first step to finding the courage to change it. If this story touched your heart, if it made you reflect on your own life, leave me a like and subscribe to the channel. Because there are more people like you who need to hear that they deserve to be treated with love, with respect, with dignity, and that it is never, ever too late to start over.